This lecture covers Chapter 15 and explores the regulations by which laboratory testing, including point-of-care testing, is performed. Central to this discussion are the Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendments of 1988, referred to as CLIA 88 or just CLIA. CLIA is a federal mandate that identifies laboratory testing standards and supersedes the requirements outlined in the Clinical Laboratory Improvement Act of 1967. The regulations related to safety, that is, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration requirements, are also discussed along with the protection of patient medical information by the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Following successful completion of this chapter, the learner will be able to, in the framework of CLIA, discuss the concepts of site neutrality, certification, test complexity categories, proficiency testing, quality systems for non-waived testing, and professional personal hierarchy in a laboratory setting. Second objective, compare and contrast CLIA, COLA, TJC, and CAP testing requirements for waived and non-waived testing. Third, formulate strategies for meeting the regulations that are applicable to his or her healthcare organization. Fourth, describe the OSHA requirements in terms of laboratory testing. And finally, discuss the laboratory requirements for meeting the HIPAA legislation. The Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendments of 1988. It regulates all laboratory testing used for diagnosis, monitoring, or treatment. It establishes quality standards for all laboratory testing to ensure accuracy, reliability, and timeliness of patient test results. It is also a test site neutral, which means same regulations apply regardless of the location of testing. CMS, with the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, were charged originally with developing and promulgating the CLIA regulations. Each certificate has a fee schedule, which is dependent on the number of test specialties, test complexity level, and test volume. The testing requirements are based on the complexity or difficulty to perform a test method. The three categories of test methods are waived, moderate complexity, which includes the subcategory of provider-performed microscopy procedures, or PPMP, for clinicians and mid-level practitioners only, and high complexity. If a site develops its own test procedure or chooses to modify an existing FDA-approved procedure, which includes not following the manufacturer's directions, the test automatically falls into the high complexity category and is subject to CLIA's most stringent requirements. The most up-to-date version of the CLIA requirements that include all of the changes can be downloaded from the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services website. Once the laboratory is judged to be in compliance with the requirements through inspection, a permanent certificate of compliance is issued to those laboratories inspected by an agent of CMS, or a certificate of accreditation is issued to laboratories seeking accreditation by a CMS deemed professional organization. As of June 2010, approximately 220,000 CLIA certificates have been issued. Information on applying for a CLIA certificate along with associated certificate fees is available on CMS's website. CLIA 88 law specifies that laboratory requirements are to be based on complexity of the test method performed and established provisions for categorizing a test as waived. Provisions for categorizing a test as waived, which are test methods waived from regulatory oversight, are provided if they meet certain requirements established by the statute. CLIA defines waived as test cleared by the FDA for home use, which means patients can purchase the product over the counter and test using such simple and accurate methodologies that the likelihood of erroneous results is negligible. In 1992, when the requirements for meeting CLIA were first published in the Federal Register, only simple and foolproof methods for 8 analytes were waived. Beginning in 1997, Congress instituted revisions to the CLIA waiver provisions, and under the current process, waiver may be granted to any test listed in the regulation, any test system in which the manufacturer provides scientifically valid data to meet the waiver criteria, and test systems cleared by the FDA for home use. These criteria are considered key elements to perform a test correctly. A score of 1 indicates the lowest level of complexity, and a score of 3 is the highest level when applying scores to the 7 criteria. For the 7 criteria, test systems receiving a total score of 12 or less are categorized as moderate complexity testing. Methods receiving scores above 12 are categorized as high complexity. Of the test systems currently being marketed, more than one-half are classified as moderate complexity, and the remaining, excluding those in the waived category, are high complexity. Personnel for moderate complexity testing. For sites performing moderate complexity testing, individuals with the proper qualifications must be identified for the 4 positions of director, technical consultant, clinical consultant, and testing personnel. The director is responsible for all aspects of laboratory operation and administration. Although the director may delegate the duties to qualified individuals, the director is ultimately responsible for ensuring that all duties are properly performed. When the director is a physician, she or he typically also serves as the clinical consultant or as the liaison between the patient and clinician. Laboratory must employ one or more individuals who are qualified by education and either training or experience to provide technical consultation for each of the specialties and subspecialties of services in which the laboratory performs moderate complexity test procedures. Personnel for moderate complexity testing. Clinical consultant must be clinician or have doctorate in chemical, physical, biological, or medical technology or clinical laboratory science, plus CMS approved board certification. Serves as a liaison between the laboratory and its customers, and must be qualified to consult with clinicians and patients and give opinions concerning the diagnosis, treatment, and management of patient care. Minimum requirements for testing personnel include a high school education or equivalent, plus appropriate director-approved training and continued competency assessment, at least yearly. Personnel for high complexity testing. For sites performing high complexity testing, individuals with the proper qualification must be identified for 5 positions: director, technical supervisor, clinical consultant, general supervisor, and testing personnel. As with moderate complexity testing, the director is responsible for the overall operation and administration of the laboratory. In addition to laboratory training or experience, to qualify as a director, an individual must be a licensed doctor of medicine, osteopathy, or podiatry, have a doctorate in chemical, physical, biological, or medical technology, or clinical laboratory science. For those hired after February 24, 2003, the individual must also be certified by a board approved by the Health and Human Services or have qualified as a director on or before February 28, 1992. The technical supervisor establishes the quality standards of the laboratory by selecting and monitoring methods and instrumentation, and evaluating and documenting the competency of its personnel at least once per year after the first year of employment. The qualifications for these positions range from a clinician to an individual possessing a bachelor's degree in medical technology or clinical laboratory science or chemical, physical, or biological science plus specified training and/or experience. Personnel for high complexity testing, they must be a clinician or have a doctorate in chemical, physical, biological, or medical technology or clinical laboratory science. Personnel for high complexity testing are personnel who have served or would be qualified to serve as a general supervisor on or before February 28, 1992 can fill this position. Personnel for high complexity testing. Testing personnel. These are personnel performing high complexity testing must have an associate degree in laboratory science or medical laboratory technology or education and training equivalent to an associate degree. Successful participation in proficiency testing is a requirement for maintaining the CLIA Certificate of Compliance. All laboratories must be enrolled in a CMS-approved proficiency testing program for at least the CLIA-specified regulated analytes tested. CLIA requirements identify the minimum performance limits for passing each analyte in the 3 PT events that occur yearly and mandates that PT samples be treated as much as possible like patient specimens. Testing sites failing the same analytes in 2 of 3 consecutive PT events can be subject to sanctions ranging from being required to submit a plan of correction to mandatory suspension of testing for the failed analyte. Quality systems for non-waived testing represents the specified requirements are for all non-waived testing applicable to both the moderate and high complexity test categories. The pre-analytical requirements specify the information needed on each test request and the policies and procedures that must be in place for specimen submission, handling, and referral. The analytical requirements address the procedure manual, all components associated with a particular test system or instrument, verification of methods performance specifications before routine implementation, maintenance and function checks, calibration and calibration verification, and quality control procedures. This section also includes additional requirements for specialty testing, such as bacteriology and immunohematology. Post-analytical requirements include the systems that need to be in place to ensure accurate, reliable, and timely reported patient data, along with the needed information in the test report. The requirements for each of the three phases of testing have identical quality assessments and continuous quality improvement mandates. Failure to follow manufacturer's directions is one of the top deficiencies identified by inspectors for CLIA compliance. As a consequence, high-quality standard operating procedures, or SOPs, are essential. All procedures for non-wave testing must at least include written policies and procedures for patient preparation, specimen collection, labeling, preservation, transportation, referral, specimen acceptability and rejection, step-by-step performance of the procedure, instrument calibration and calibration verification, reportable range, quality control and corrective actions, limitations to the methodology, reference intervals, panic values, literature references, reporting of patient results, and course of action when a test system becomes inoperable. Any changes to the procedures require reapproval by the current director. Test sites developing their own methods or modifying FDA-approved test systems must also determine analytical sensitivity and specificity, appropriate reference ranges, and any other performance characteristics required for test performance. Test sites are also allowed to use routine manufacturers' approaches to quality control, but must first qualify this and have data to prove that the manufacturer's approach provides information on method performance equivalent to that provided by traditional liquid external quality control. CMS assesses a fee for this process. These inspections are unannounced but must be conducted while the laboratory CLIA certificate is still valid. Many testing sites decide to meet the CLIA requirements through professional accreditation. Testing sites voluntarily choose to be accredited by a CLIA-deemed organization and pay the required fees, which are in addition to the ongoing CLIA fees. In 2010, approximately 220,000 testing sites received CLIA certificates. 8% of these are accredited and inspected by deemed organizations. When these sites meet the accrediting agency's requirements as assessed through inspection every 2 years, the test site is, in essence, meeting CLIA requirements. CMS, however, has the right as a quality check to re-inspect up to 5% of testing sites accredited by deemed organizations. The choice of accrediting organization is the decision of the laboratory. The Joint Commission recognizes the test categories including wave test methods as defined by CLIA. But unlike CLIA, TJC has specified requirements including personnel training and quality control criteria and inspects waved testing. The Laboratory Accreditation Program of the College of American Pathologists accredits only laboratory testing sites and not the entire healthcare organization. LAPCAP spells out its requirements in a series of specialty-related checklists. All test sites must follow the Laboratory General Checklist and then the specific checklist appropriate to the specialty of testing. Proficiency testing has long been an important component of LAPCAP inspection philosophy. CAP accredited sites, including POCT sites and those performing only wave testing, must participate in PT through CAP surveys or other CAP-approved PT surveys for each analyte tested. For high-complexity testing, CAP-accredited test sites must identify a director, clinical consultant, technical supervisor, general supervisor, and testing personnel. COLA, formerly the Commission of Office Laboratory Accreditation, initially focused on accrediting physician office laboratories. Today, COLA accredits many other types of test sites, including those in small hospitals. Inspectors usually are medical technologists or clinical laboratory scientists who are prepared to assist test sites in meeting the regulations and generating quality test results. Please review the comparison of testing requirements among CLIA, COLA accreditation, TJC accreditation, and accreditation with LAPCAP. This is just the continuation in comparing the testing requirements among CLIA, COLA, TJC, LAPCAP. These regulations are most commonly known as the OSHA Bloodborne Pathogens Standard. In general, the handling of biological specimens fall under the part of the OSHA regulations addressing universal or standard precautions. Employees must be informed of the occupational hazards provided with personal protective equipment such as goggles, masks, gloves, gowns, and laboratory coats, and monitored to ensure compliance with safety procedures. Employees at risk for exposure must receive employer-financed hepatitis B vaccinations unless they sign an affidavit stating that they refused the vaccine. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act established new privacy rules for covered entities, including laboratories, which took effect April 14, 2003. While not all information needs to be protected under HIPAA, most patient information is considered protected and is subject to HIPAA requirements. For example, this rule requires healthcare organizations, including laboratory test sites, insurers, and payers using any electronic means of storing patient data and performing claim submission to comply with the final rule for national standards for electronic transactions. The extensive standards for privacy of individually identifiable health information are designed to help guarantee privacy and confidentiality of patients' medical records. Healthcare providers must be in HIPAA compliance, which means that staff needs to be educated and trained, and documentation of these activities available to demonstrate compliance with the HIPAA requirements. Staff also is subject to ongoing compliance, monitoring, and application of appropriate sanctions when necessary. For more details on HIPAA, refer to the government website. Today's laboratories must meet multiple regulations, including CLIA, HIPAA, OSHA, and others. With CLIA, all laboratories are required to implement minimum standards to ensure quality laboratory test results that are available in a reasonable time frame. Meeting these standards, which may be achieved through CLIA deemed professional organizations, is critical in providing high-quality laboratory services to the healthcare community. Laboratory managers must be familiar with all applicable regulations and constantly work toward ensuring that they are met at minimum and preferably at an exceeded level. You can check these important links: United States Department of Health and Human Services, the United States Department of Labor, particularly Occupational Safety and Health Administration, as well as the United States Food and Drug Administration. Today's laboratories must meet multiple regulations: the CLIA, HIPAA, OSHA, and others.